Look at the virtual background I have set right now. It's hysterical. Look at this, babe. That's kind of funny. We should have a call with the kids like the end of next week.
Jane coming in said happy birthday. Excuse people. We did a video.
Thanks to all the workers out there. Thank you.
How do we know them though?
Thanks to all the workers out there. Thank you.
They look different. You know, they all look different when their hair's down. I love it. I love this. I love being able to do this. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Toy. You think it looks cheesy? I think it's hysterical. Even with a rhinoceros? Let me get that. What if I'm inside a big tree? I love it.
Working to help with COVID-19 right now. I'm very appreciative and thank you for keeping us safe. Thank you.
It's pretty cool. She did it. Katie ever upload her pictures?
Carson said happy birthday.
Mhm.
What is it?
I don't know. That was supposed to be for my birthday, I guess.
Thank you, law enforcement and firefighters.
Mhm.
Thank you, healthcare providers, nurses, and doctors.
I didn't hear this on Facebook.
Yeah, that's on Facebook.
We appreciate it so much from the West.
That was the one I posted.
Yeah, it's good. Do you know who's texting me?
Thank you, law enforcement and firefighters.
Mhm,
Thank you,
it's cute.
healthcare providers, nurses, and doctors. Thank you to everybody else that's safe.
We appreciate it so much from the West family.
Mhm.
That's awesome.
It is.
Good one.
Mhm. 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 Mhm.
Placeit's Instagram video makers let you quickly and easily create fantastic videos which are perfect for this story. You don't need to download any software or
Mhm.
Strange days, but here we are to talk about your books. Showed up. Does anybody have anything they want to share? Any questions, concerns? You guys are all drilled in how we do this. I think any of you could host this at this point. So,
Sure, Hal. I'll jump in first off the
yeah, Benny.
bat. Pardon the bat pun there. It's probably a bad time to say off the bat. Yeah, look, I had a breakthrough and a slowdown last week. I shared that in the group. I've been sharing my model with a lot of thinkers that I respect, not the whole book, just the model. And it became apparent that it was missing a key element to make it whole. And I shared this with Dr. Kate in a call this morning as well. So on one side, that's good that I can finally see how it all fits together and why it was so difficult to make it all fit together. So I'm very clear on that. On the other hand, I'm going to need another 100 or 200 hours of writing and reconfiguring to to make it all work. So yeah, it's bittersweet, but the good thing is I've got plenty of time in this office to do deep work and to get it done. So that's where I'm up to.
Well, it's good to discover this now rather than later, but let me ask you about the 100 to 200 hours, because Emily and I would write 2 books like from scratch in that time. Now that's our job, like I get it, but that sounds like a hell of a lot of time for adjustment. Tell me more about what you think you need to do.
Well, look, my book it's the book, but it's also a system that's going to become what I productize and sell and give and educate in the world. So the book is the format for everything else that comes from it. So dedicating that time to it and getting all of the pieces to be a complete system of development is time really well spent. I have to go through and clearly document each element, how it all fits together, and present it in a way that will allow me to immediately go into creating content off it as well. So it's an investment in my business and my practice.
Yeah. So it's more than just a book. You're really building your whole practice.
Yeah. So it's to me, this is the cornerstone of everything that will come from this. So it's really important that I invest the time in it and treat it as a whole business.
Good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, good. Thanks for the
What
update.
better
I'm glad you
time?
showed up.
Yeah, it's a good time. We've got a baby coming in sometime in the next 30 days as well. So I'm trying to
Congrats.
get a lot of it's I'm looking forward to telling my son that when he came into the world, the whole world stopped.
Yeah.
So
It's all about the frame, man. It's all about how you frame things. So that's great.
Yeah, it helps. But look, I've looked inwards, and I'm not fearfully delaying the process or anything. I just genuinely need to make it whole.
Yeah. No, I wasn't
work.
thinking. That wasn't a sideways accusation of you dragging your feet. I was just really curious about what you're doing. So.
Yeah, well, that's a real concern and a real fear, but able to look at it objectively and go, that's not what's going on here. I actually have to take everything online. I have to build everything into a system, and the book can be the vehicle for that. So I've upped the stakes, and I'm prepared to put in the work.
Good. All right. That's great, Benny. I can't wait to see this book finally someday.
Me too, Hal. Me too. It better be bloody good after all the talking I've done.
Yeah. No kidding. Wow, that's great. Cool. There are a couple people on now who we didn't get to last week. Sam, I know we didn't get to you last week. I was wondering if you wanted to check in or if you had a question, or just tell us how you are.
Hi, everybody. I haven't been around for a while. I'm a doctor. I live in the Turks and Caicos, for those of you who don't know me. So I'm sort of a bit frontline at the moment. It's been a bit of a stressful month. So why am I jumping back on? So I basically finished the book on time in the middle of January, finished my vomit draft. Was done, and then I frankly put it down, and life sort of caught up with me, and I really struggled to get back into starting editing it. So that's been a real problem for me, and I wasn't disciplined about editing as I was about writing. I was very good about writing. I wrote every day from September after I left the course. I didn't miss a thing. I think I missed 4 days to the middle of January in total. Wrote a lot, wrote too much, about 60,000 words. Then I started editing it, and then just to sort of and then I didn't sort of like, I sort of started editing it in terms of just trying to cut down what I'd written. So that's where I started. And then I did the introduction sort of chapter, and I did the first chapter. And then actually I found somebody who was sort of one of my beta readers. So somebody who I thought would actually be interested in the book. So I gave it to them, those 2 chapters, and they read it. And it was really helpful, actually. So, because they sort of went through it, and they actually just started saying that I don't understand this paragraph. It's too complicated. This is difficult to understand, or these words are too big for most people. Make it simpler, make it simpler. So I started to do that. So I've sort of rewritten the first chapter a little bit and tried to make it flow better, and it does. There are certain things that I can say to people that stood out in this individual's mind. One was I have managed to weave a bit of my life story and other people's stories into the book. It's a book about how to be healthy. And that was, that individual thought that that was really a helpful thing and improved the read enormously by making it a little bit more human and making it something that people could relate to. So that's sort of where I am. I'm sort of also at that point that everybody warned me about, because I'm usually quite a confident person where I think the book's a bunch of rubbish. And like, I'm looking at it going, God, what a waste of energy and time. And everybody knows all this stuff. So some of the comments that people shared last week. So I'm in that sort of self-doubt. Why did I get into this? Everybody knows this stuff sort of phase at the moment. But I recognize from all the reading and the teaching that these guys have been given that that's the phase, and you just keep plugging along. And the re-edit of the rewrite of chapter 1 actually is much better than the first time round. So I get it when Tucker said, I think he edited his first book 5 or 7 times or something outrageous. I get it. You're gonna write a good book, you got to do the hard work, guys. You just got to keep going back and having a look and get something to help you and be encouraged. That's my feeling, and those are my thoughts. That's it. I'll shut up now.
I love that conflict of I think my book is too basic and everyone understands this. I'm getting feedback from people that I use words that are too big and I need to like simplify things. It's of course what you have to say is valuable. So I'm glad that you recognize that this is kind of a phase of confidence dipping rather than actual need to reevaluate the value of your book.
Yes. Yeah, no, absolutely. Some of it, and then it's just discipline. I mean, you'd think now I'd have plenty of time, but I don't. It's gone completely other way. I've got all sorts of, as you imagine. COVID is very difficult for all of us, but it's particularly difficult for those of us who are trying to take care of it. It's a challenging time. But that makes the book more relevant, actually. I mean, I'd sort of like to get it finished because there are going to be a lot of people in 6 months going, maybe we should read this book. And it's a shame it wasn't ready now, actually, because really the best protection is to be healthy, actually. I mean, social distancing and all those things, but probably one of the best protections is actually live a healthy lifestyle and look after yourself and have a relatively robust immune system and all the things I've written about. So anyway, it's fine. It'll come out and I'm sort of, I'll make September. We'll make the deadline, but it will be September.
Well, that's great, Sam. And I'm impressed that you have any time to work on it at all right now, frankly. So,
yeah, well, thanks. Yeah, no, I'm pretty tired, actually, I have to say. It's quite nice to jump on here and listen to everybody else.
All right. Fair enough. What else is something you want to share? Otherwise, I'm going to start throwing darts at the screen.
Jason,
all right, here we
have at
go.
it.
Amanda.
We had 2.
Jason's
okay.
got something.
Well, I was just going to say, I'm surprised in myself because I actually haven't written as well as I would have expected to be able to write while I was in quarantine. We kind of self-selected to quarantine ourselves. I was like, oh, look, so much time now. And I just found every other distraction and every other thing I could possibly work on except the book. And I'm like, God damn it. Like, now that there's this, like on the work side, it's like there's so many more initiatives that we're working on. There's so many pivots we're doing with the company. And I'm just spending all my time, more time than ever, on working on projects when it comes to creating courses, creating content, creating social stuff. But when it comes to writing the book, it's like, okay, I'm in my hour of writing the book. Well, let me check the news of what's going on COVID. Oh, let me go on Instagram. Let me go this. And I'm like, I feel like I'm dodging it.
You probably are. Like, newsflash, you're probably right about that.
No, 100%. and then I'm like, God damn, why? Like, I'm in a great space. Like, I came here to Bali because I knew I'd have no distraction in a great spot. Now I'm stuck here and I'm like, okay, and I don't need to travel. And I've created an entire course on productivity and I'm training everyone within my company on how to be more productive. And I'm like, yeah. And then my girlfriend looks at me and she's like, but why aren't you writing your book? You're finding all the other things to do except write your book. What's the single most important thing of the year? I'm like, stop it. And so I wrote a bit today. It was the first time in a long time, finished chapter 7. And I'm really excited to get back into this kind of cadence, but it's been like running through deep mud. And then every time I just take a break, I'm like, actually, it's comfortable here.
Good.
So that's
Yeah,
the process.
Sounds like it's all working as advertised.
It's almost like you guys gave us a chart about how this was going to go.
I know, or some kind of map or something.
I know. And for some reason,
Yeah.
I'm exactly where I'm expected to be. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm someone that sets like weekly goals, and and then there's so many distractions that kept I was like, okay, every week I write a chapter. Then I got invited to do a TEDx talk in like Copenhagen. I was like, oh, this is important. It's going to be on the TED channel. So I'm like, okay, so I'll put the book aside because obviously this is a new one thing. And then COVID happened, and I'm like, well, I'm not going to Copenhagen anymore. So then I can focus back on the book. Thank you, universe. But then I'm still not working on the book, and I'm like, what the fuck? Like, and so now I'm.
So why do you think that's happening, Jason? What's underneath that?
Underneath that, it's like I've seen this pattern happen in every time I've done any kind of project. Is I will always follow the priorities that is being given to me by someone else, and I won't set my own boundaries of the priorities that I know are important for me. And so, and it's interesting because I interviewed the man who talked about this, and I teach this concept to everyone I teach, obviously, which is you should be starting with your own priorities, then the priorities in your relationship, and then your work priorities. And what do? Work priorities, and then a little leftover for the relationship so I can make sure it survives. And then for me, well, I'm going to bed, or I'm going to find something that's more distracting to do because I'm so exhausted. I just need to brain fart and do nothing for a while. And then I'm like, shit, I need to flip that around. Like work can wait. Work will be fine. I'm important. My relationships are important. And this is how it has to go. So it's clearly not a problem of knowing what to do. It's just doing it.
Practicing. I will say I struggled hard. Well, I still sometimes go through phases where I struggle hard with this, in part because there's nothing more gratifying when you're struggling with your own personal book to do something really productive that you know will actually help people in the short term, right? Like, so there's
Instant
always that push.
gratification.
Yeah. But I found that what has been most helpful for me is to think about think about writing hygiene in the same way that I think about sleep hygiene. You know, like I have rules for myself where I don't look at screens X amount of times before bed. And, you know, I dim all the lights in my house and I brush my teeth and I take magnesium and blah, blah, blah. I have this whole routine, right? And when I approach my writing time with the same degree of really ritual making and routine, it helps me so much. Like I don't like to drink coffee every single morning because I don't like to be addicted to caffeine. It doesn't do that well for me. But the ritual of like getting up, grinding my coffee, heating up the water, doing all the fancy BS that us hipsters do when we make coffee. And then finally I sit down with it in front of my computer. That's the signal to me that like this is my time. This is how I've opened my day and my time, and I'm doing nothing else but devoting myself to the thing I said I was going to devote myself to. And that one ritual helps to just tune me into the order of importance of what I'm doing. And I make myself then, it's easier to push off things like checking messages, checking email until after I'm done with my writing time.
Yeah, I honestly, well, of course, I teach this.
Right. Yeah. I don't know why I'm teaching you.
No. It's funny because you need to hear it again. Like those who don't know teach, right? And so I hear this. I'm like, yeah, that is what's going on. And things that come in my mind is that I've had like appointments, like podcasts that like I'm recording so many interviews, and this is in the morning. So I have no consistency in my morning routine because it depends on how many interviews I need to conduct. And so I'm realizing that I actually need to, like the time that I write the best was back when I was in Miami. And then I had like the ritual of going down to the Starbucks, buying my coffee and doing this at 7 a.m. And I knew I had nothing else. And now with these time zones, I'm doing interviews from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. And then sometimes I have them, sometimes I don't. And then I have this 1 hour working block, which is about do the book, which I move later in the day. But then I do that. Then I'm like, oh, I'm going to move it to later. And then I move it to 9 p.m. And of course, I'm not going to write a book at 9 p.m. I'm going to bed. And like, so I think I need to set my own boundaries and make sure that I don't do the interviews anymore in the morning, because I know that is like, the book's the most important. That's the first thing I love starting the day with. That is when I do the best writing, and I need to understand that. And I have a backlog of episodes till like June, so I don't know why I keep recording interviews.
So, yeah, I mean, you know exactly what this is then. You have to treat your writing time as an immovable appointment, just like you treat every other professional engagement you have in your day.
I appreciate coming here to sound it off in front of everyone, so now I feel more accountable.
Well, Jason, it's really nice that you've shared this, because I know there are people on this call who are learning from this. So your experience is wisdom for everybody. And just because you know it doesn't mean it is valuable to share with everyone. I would second everything Emily says. The one question I would ask you, and this is a rhetorical question, because I know you know this, but I want other people to hear this, which is, what would happen if you stopped doing the podcast in the morning? And you just answered that question. You said, well, I got podcasts covered until June, so I'm fine. The reason I asked that question is for those of you who may be facing a similar problem, like ask yourself that, like, what's the worst thing that happens if I honor my hour of writing in the morning? And probably it's not very much. So, I mean, for some people it's real, like there's real shit going on in the world right now. We have to deal with stuff. But if you really do want to write your book, you probably can find a plan like Emily's described, and which I ascribe to, very similar. It can work quite well. So that's cool, Jason. Get it done.
Thanks everybody for listening.
See how simple it is? I just tell you to write your book and we're done. Let's see. Doug says he has an editing question. I'm gonna let Amanda off the hook for the moment. Doug, what you got?
Yeah, I believe I finished my Grammarly edit today, getting through the whole thing. And my question is I know the editing questions are, is there anything else I can do today to make my book better? Yes or no, and then do that thing. Hemingway, there's, now I've gone through one AI editing program. Are there benefits in using Hemingway at this point?
I don't think so for you. You have soldiered through Grammarly in a truly epic manner. I think Hemingway is going to have marginal benefit for you at this point.
Okay.
And remember, like, we're reading it too, right? Like you still have a bunch of eyes coming onto your manuscript. And what you, excuse me, what you shared with me by email about, what was the name of that system you were using to establish readability level? What's that called?
The Fletch readability score. Yeah. So Grammarly gives you a 0 to 100
Yeah, I hadn't heard about that.
Yeah, it gives you a 0 to 100 score of how readable your content is, with 100 being a kindergartner can read it, 0 being it's extremely technical, legal real estate descriptions, something crazy like that. And they say that a 10-year-old reads at about a score of 80 and above is for a 10-year-old. And so as I was going through the readability score for my various chapters, I had some where I was like, fantastic, that's 82, that's right on. Others where I'm like, ooh, 58, ooh, I need to do some work here probably. So
yeah, that's really interesting. I hadn't focused on those scores before. That's useful. I think you're probably going to be in good shape. You've been very methodical about what you've done. Emily's nodding. So
enthusiastically, yeah. And Hemingway app it's more a style like sentence refiner. Grammarly does that too, and Grammarly also does actual grammar like fixes. So since you did Grammarly first, I would say don't worry about it. And those of you who haven't done either of these, I would probably choose one or the other. If you think that simplifying your writing style is what you need to focus on, Hemingway is fantastic for that. If you're cool with your style, but you think your conventions, your punctuation, and that sort of thing is really messy, then Grammarly can be a nice way to clean it up before you send it in to us. But you don't necessarily need to do both.
Okay.
Sam
Would
just sent me a message saying he's used both. Sam, what's your experience been?
So this is actually, this is a really interesting discussion. So I have been using both, and I think they're very different in their approach. So I've actually run paragraphs through both at the same time. I've taken one and run it through Grammarly, and then taken it and putting it through Hemingway afterwards. And it's very interesting to see how the two software programs treat it very, very differently. And you end up with a very different scoring system. So then what I did was I went the other way. I went to Hemingway and then ran it through Grammarly. So it's interesting. I'm listening to your scores because I don't stop altering it until I hit 99%. Like I will go back and rewrite and rewrite and rewrite until Grammarly tells me that I've got a 99% score on what I've written. So I don't know how accurate that is, but certainly when I sent it to this other person to read, it definitely improved it.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. When you open up that 99 score, then it opens up another window of okay, there you go.
yeah, so it's really interesting. I found it very helpful, and it's cut I've cut more. What it's really I found helpful is it's maybe much more concise, and it really makes me think about a sentence I've written. So if you're going to do your edit, it just, to my mind, it just makes me think, wow. And then and Hemingway makes you take it gets rid of all the fluff like immediately. It's like you take that word out, that's all too much really. Just cut that down, which is really what we were taught in the class and everything we read, and that's what Hemingway always said, wasn't it? Why say something with 20 words if you say it in one?
Great, that's really helpful.
Good,
Thanks,
thank
guys.
you.
All right, Amanda, I'm coming back to you for the third time. How are things going for you? You're living in social media world. It must be very interesting.
Oh yeah, people are just doing a bunch of weird stuff everywhere. Yeah, just lots of Corona content.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I appreciate Jason's share. I had a very similar experience, just getting a lot of that short-term, creating a lot of like short-term solutions for people as all the Corona stuff started to rise. Something also happened where I was keeping track of my word count on like the sticky app on your computer, and it kept deleting itself. So it just, if it's not there, it's like something in my mind, even if it's on my calendar, like has been skipping over my morning word count. So I'm here for accountability. I'm here to take responsibility. Listening to what Jason said and what you guys shared with him was really helpful. When I am writing, it's going well. I'm writing big chunks, like 600 to 1200 words or so each time. So it's like things are flowing. I'm getting like a lot of stories written down, which is really helpful. I'm also I'm like jumping around a little bit I'm not like finishing a full chapter. Like I don't feel very complete I don't know, maybe 2/3. I have a lot of words written for 4 chapters, essentially. I have anywhere from 3,000 to 4,000 words for 4 chapters right now. And it's just, it's feeling like good for me to do it in that way. It's organic, and it's allowing me to write what feels present, and also see how else I can organize it with what I already have organized in the outline. But I'm totally open to more feedback if that's not really going to be helpful for me in my editing process.
I'm curious. So you're jumping between chapters. Are you reading back through what you're writing?
So I guess jumping isn't the right word. It's more like when I felt like I needed to go do research in chapter 1, I was like, I'll start chapter 2. And then I was like, okay, I feel good with what I wrote here in chapter 2. So I haven't actually jumped backwards anywhere yet, but I'm like getting a lot, like I felt like, okay, I want to start moving into chapter 4 now. So I wrote stuff for chapter 4, but I haven't read back, and I'm not reading back.
Then that's great. Then essentially what you're doing is writing your vomit outline, knowing you're leaving some holes for yourself, it sounds like.
Yeah. I'm like highlighting in yellow where I'm leaving holes.
Yeah, I think that sounds totally fine. Emily?
Yeah, that sounds great. I will say, and this is not a note for current you, this is a note for future you. I think that a lot of times when we go in to fill kind of those meat and potatoes parts of the chapters and then try to go back and do the connective tissue, I see a lot of authors kind of spin out in that secondary process of like then filling in the holes that they left themselves. And this actually occurred to me as I was working on an author's book today, that I was spinning out on a conclusion. I was spinning out on like a connective piece basically. And I remembered that that's a totally normal and necessary part of the writing process. Like if you write to a point and then you reach resistance and you have trouble like figuring out what to write next, that happens to everyone. And it's like, it's your brain working on putting those pieces together. So I just wanted to call that out and make it apparent so that you know when that happens to you, if you start being like, oh my God, none of this goes together. It does. Your subconscious will work on that. It will help you figure things out. And it may take like a couple hours of frustration when you go to dig into that. So
yeah, that's so interesting. Thank you. I appreciate that perspective a lot, because I feel like what I'm writing is good. I feel like I'm writing important pieces. There's definitely like places where you said the connective tissue or whatever that's gonna like have to find a way to connect itself slowly but surely.
Mm-hmm. And it will.
And it will, great, yeah. And I also feel like I'm writing almost in this like fast way where it feels like I'm just trying to get the thought out there, and it's coming out okay, but I know it's not my best writing.
Not supposed to be.
Yeah, it's a vomit.
You're vomiting.
Yeah, okay, cool. That's
you
fine.
vomit slowly? Do you like to make it last?
So you're supposed to vomit fast.
Generally.
Fair enough. So if I think about the literal process of vomiting, it will all
Unless you're a cat where they have a whole bunch of preamble before they finally get rid of the hairball. But all right.
True.
Well, that's great. Yeah, it sounds like you're spot on, honestly. So
yeah, aside from my fall off the wagon situation, but I came here to get back on and get accountable. I couldn't make the call last week, and just everything going on. Like I really resonated with everything Jason was talking about, just like whatever kind of resistance and whatever kind of stuff that came up, and feeling like I needed to do other things and avoid the book, and just recalibrating to that, like this is a huge priority for me to get done.
Good. That's great.
Yeah. Thank you.
Before we forget it, Mike Sowers had a question about when to use Hemingway or Grammarly. Mike, generally it should be pretty much the last thing you do before you send it in to us, because if you put really dirty copy through it, it's just gonna find a ton of things and be really confusing. So make your manuscript as good as you can on your own, doing your own edit, and then that's just a polish. And for everybody too, like Grammarly and Hemingway are optional. You guys do not have to do this. Some people like to do it. If you don't do it, like we have human editors here. This is what we do. We're grateful when you send super clean copy to us, but it's up to you. So, all right.
Well, I want to pick on Leah next because she sent me a question and I sort of forced her to come on this call and talk about it because I think her question is probably something several of you are grappling with, and I think this could be useful for everyone.
Thanks, Emily.
Thank you.
So I actually broached this issue in a recent call, but just in case someone isn't aware, the working title for my book was Data Presentation Pandemic. And the underlying theme was meant to be, Jason's laughing at me on mute right now, just a little. The underpinning was that there is this silent epidemic of horrible presentation habits that we pick up from each other just by default, and they are transforming our audience into zombies. So the whole point was supposed to be sort of like this somewhat funny, because people resonate when they hear about zombies and presentations. It's visceral. And the whole platform really was around health. So like that's how a lot of my products and teaching things are around like the health of your presentations and habits and such. So I'm coming to the close of my vomit draft finally, and I'm now grappling, I'm working on just vomiting out the pieces that don't have anything to do with the theme. But as I'm facing going back to the beginning of my book, which kind of prefaces it, and it doesn't even speak to what's happening right now. So the other piece is that I'm trying to pivot in my business because I teach data presentation skills, is how to do that from any location now that we are not in front of each other as a totally remote workforce. So now I'm even trying to make this book relevant with this time period. And I don't know if I have to choose like a completely different theme, because my fear is that even though I had this idea before, it will look completely tasteless and cheap to try, like I'm trying to capitalize on this global event for something, you know, relatively mundane in comparison. So that, I guess that's where I'm struggling with still.
So we sort of made light of this last week or 2 weeks ago when you brought this up, and I'm glad you brought it back, because clearly like things are different, right?
Yeah.
And here's what I'd like to suggest. I would be grateful if people get in the chat and just like in one line, you like what, Leah, go ahead and type your title into the chat, and then
okay.
just like it, don't like it, not sure. And then let's have a conversation around it, because I'd love to sort of get the hive mind going on this a little bit. So data presentation pandemic. You guys jump in there. And
it was either that or epidemic, but this idea that it's like this silent thing that's killing our meetings and, you know, success. So
have you thought of just trying a thesaurus, you know, and coming up with a slightly different angle on this? I
have, and I mean, it comes up with things like epidemic, infection. I'm just thinking it's going to be too heightened, you know, but unfortunately for me, it's the analogy I got attached to because it fits in so many respects. Yeah. The other thought I had was like apocalypse, because that has a tie to zombie, but I just don't know. But the thing is, my style is a bit irreverent, and you know, a lot of the writers in my space are super serious and businesslike, and that's kind of the whole point that I'm trying to break the mold in, is to not quite be like that, to use a bit of irreverence and such. So that's why I'm trying to steer off that way.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of lit up a little when you were talking about wanting the tone to lean toward the more irreverent and humorous. I think if you lean further in that direction, it will, you have an opportunity to paint this in a way that works well. I still agree not to use pandemic.
Yeah.
But I mean, certainly zombies are still hilarious, and it might just be a simple tweak, like how to make presentations that don't suck out your brains. You know, it's
like something like
on that. Yeah.
Presentation zombie apocalypse, or something that like ties like this thing that is happening worldwide, but it's not a pandemic, but it's like, I don't know, because zombie apocalypse is a
so that's a really good distinction, because like 6 months ago, like the terms viral and pandemic meant something really different than what they mean.
Right.
And right now, for the moment, zombie apocalypse is still funny. Now,
it will always be funny.
Seeing as how you used the term pandemic, and now we're here, I'm a little hesitant to suggest you use the term zombie apocalypse, because you seem to have great powers, Leah. But if we're willing to take that risk, then that's getting you back into that the humor space where you're using the existing, you know, tight ass approach and pushing off of that, right? That's a
Right.
foil for what you're doing. So you need to find new language that gives you that again, because you sort of lost that meaning with the pandemic.
And the zombie trope still uses a viral vector, if I can like use super academic words to describe a comic book. So it doesn't, I don't think you would have to change much, if anything, to the actual content in your book. I think the main thing is the title. And in hearing you brainstorm this, it sounds like you're still kind of going off the frame of data, presentation, fill in the blank. And I would encourage you to like completely set that aside and a lot of different frames, right? Like just totally open up your mind for possibilities. I would write out, well, when I'm title brainstorming, I just write out long, insane lists of like questions and weird words that I'd love to use. And, but just anything you can do to kind of break open the way that you're conceiving of your title, I think will help you reorganize around the tone that you want here.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's a really good idea.
I might be coming back week after week with like rapid fire titles.
Yeah, I love this chat survey. I think this is really effective.
You got some good feedback here.
Yeah,
I know the death by PowerPoint has actually been coined already, and also Microsoft's one of my clients, so I have to be careful about, you know, the mention of specific tools. But the help was really helpful. The help was helpful. Thank you. I'm a writer.
Help should be helpful. You know, I'm just speaking of brainstorming titles. I'm reminded of something. I worked on Mark Colley's book, Song Journey. So he's a very successful songwriter. And he wrote something in that book that kind of blew my mind. And any of us could use when working on titles, especially if you're really stuck. It's a little harder to do now because of social distancing. But he always has a notebook with him. And he would literally go to bookstores and just walk along. And you could do this in Amazon, I suppose. Basically walk along the shelves and look at the spines and just look for words and phrases and things he liked, put them in his notebook. And some of those would end up as lines in songs. That's where, that's like how you sort of make inspiration happen. That was one of his techniques. I'm like, oh, that's a really cool idea.
Okay.
So, Leah, some version of that might help you, or any of you, if you're really trying to brainstorm your titles or your subtitles.
Yeah, any title brainstorming ideas are welcome.
Have you read the title blog that is in your resources? We have a really great piece, not on like specific framing, but ways to think about how you can put your title together.
I did a year ago. It's probably worth rereading.
Yeah.
Now.
We'll find it and post it in.
Yeah, I'll look that up right now.
Yeah, great. If you drop it in the chat, Emily, that would be great.
Thanks,
all right.
Thanks,
Who
guys.
else? Lauren, we haven't heard from you for a while. How are things out in San Diego? Where I was supposed to be.
Hey, how's it going? Yeah. Oh, did you not get to make it?
No,
shoot.
all of our travel was canceled in March, so here we are. I have a lot of credit.
Bummer. Oh, rats. Yeah, no, everything's going okay for the most part. I feel like, so I'm at about 20,000 words right now, but also too having some structural issues. So I don't really have a well-defined story arc. I'm kind of just like, first I wrote down and brainstormed like a lot of the memories and stories that I wanted to include. And so I started writing those out, and that's where I am, but it just sort of feels like a collection of memories. And I know that they're impactful, but it just is kind of like this hodgepodge of things that I don't really know how they're going to go together. And then furthermore, it's not long enough, right? So I'm kind of wondering if the next draft will help me add more words in. So yeah, and I know it will, because it's kind of just like just kind of like brainstorming things out for the first time, but I'm struggling a little bit to kind of understand like the flow.
Yeah, so remind me, did you make a solid decision to transform this into a memoir?
That's correct.
Okay, great. So yeah, there are, well, actually, before I answer this question, and there are answers, don't worry. Why don't we turn it over to Hussein, and I don't know if there's anybody else. Oh, Colleen, like Hussein, especially, I know that you're done with your vomit draft already. Do you want to talk a little bit about what it was like to finish that and then go back and do that first edit?
Oh yeah. First of all, what's up, everybody? Hope everyone's doing good. So going through the first, like when you feel like you're done, you feel like you've vomited most of everything, and then you sort of take your time off and then go back to read through. I first started like just reading, a few paragraphs at a time, kind of going chapter to chapter, and then I abandoned that and then went into just taking like 4 to 5 hours to just read the whole book. I didn't edit. I didn't go back to do anything, and realizing how much of everything really already connected in the story. And I actually realized I had more stories that I wanted to kind of put in and a few that I could scrap. And that was so revealing and empowering, because it just showed that you don't think sometimes, because you're taking breaks every other day, every week, you're writing about one thing and then you're writing about another thing. And in actuality, it does make sense. Your brain is doing the work, but it's not until you actually read through the whole thing that you realize that. And it's like you guys say, you hold your book in your head holistically as a story, because it's so fresh as you read it, that you realize where it's not connecting. So you can say, okay, build a bridge here. That's really what I did. And then you realize where it is connecting, which it'll probably be more like an 80-20, 70-30, where things lack connectivity and where things are connected. And that's where I found the strength. And then as I read through it again, I found even more deeper little pockets that I can fill in or remove, which was cool. And by the third time, which is what I did this past week, it just flowed better than I ever thought it would. And then I'm going to do it one more time just for the sake of doing it. And then I'll do my line by line edit and clean it up that way. I think I have like one little story I really want to put in, because I think it will help a point at the end be clarified. And that's, I guess, the last thing I would say is you realize how much towards the end, how many things will connect in like connecting the dots. And I didn't realize that a lot of dots connected until I read the whole thing all together. And that was crucial. So I wouldn't worry about it connecting or whatever, just vomit the whole thing out, and you'll realize that you'll need to add or take away, and that's okay. Hopefully that helps.
So it sounds like I'm kind of in the initial just painful process of the first iteration then.
Yeah. And also, like, the one thing you got to keep in mind, and it's helped me a lot, is to have a really positive outlook on what you have written. Because if you keep telling yourself, like, oh, what I wrote is not good, or I'm not a writer, or I'm not this, it's like where your mindset goes is how, like, the book will reveal itself to you. And so no matter how you feel afterwards, you can discredit that by telling yourself something negative at the beginning. So go into reading it feeling good, in the sense of like, what I've written is good, and I am empowering myself and others through this writing. And so give yourself the credit ahead of time, and then read through it, and you'll feel good reading through it, because you can always come back and clean it up. And like they said, you have a whole team. By the time you're done editing, there's a whole team that's going to help you edit through it more. So don't be hard on yourself.
That's
Emily,
awesome,
you and
Hussein.
I
Thank
can,
you so much.
you and I can go on vacation, and we're just going to have Hussein host these things, because
Seriously.
he's hire every time he's on.
Are you guys hiring by chance?
Not at the moment, I'm afraid. Like everybody else, right?
Although I don't know, hound Tucker enough, he might need help with the memoir stuff pretty
Yeah.
soon.
Yeah.
But
Once I finish
yeah,
my book. No, I'm just
yeah,
kidding.
totally,
That's great advice. Great advice.
totally great, spot
That
on.
helps.
And there's just one thing that I would add to that, which is that with memoir especially, the actual process of writing your story isn't just writing, it's also self-exploration. And so when you go through that first vomit draft, there are some things you're going to have access to and some things that you won't. Like things that are particularly, and I know this is true in your story, things that are particularly emotionally intense, or things that are really complex and life-changing, that kind of stuff you might only be able to tell like some parts of the story because that's the only part that's coming through that you have access to in the moment when you sit down to write. And that's totally cool and totally okay. My experience has been that after I write that first draft, it's like the first part of the writing gets my subconscious, I guess, stewing on whatever that thing is. And then like weeks later or whatever, when I go back and do an edit, I realize that there's more depth I can tap. I realize that there are other important memories that connect to that thing. And I have more access to it the second time around because I did at least a surface level of dealing with part of that the first time around. So trust that it's an iterative process as well. And if you don't know where something is going, that doesn't mean you have to throw it out. It just might mean that there's another layer coming for you later.
That's great. That definitely gives me a lot of hope. So thank you. Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Lauren. This was great. A couple of you were honest enough to admit in the chat that you've done something similar. So I just want to reiterate something similar to what Hussein was describing he did. I want to reiterate for everybody, just so we're super clear, how to start your edits, because a couple of you have fallen into the trap of line editing before you do your full read through, which is what Hussein was describing. When you start editing, put your pencil down and just read the whole thing through. Don't start like working paragraphs. That's where Hussein went down a rabbit hole, and a couple of others here have said you've done that too. So I thought we were pretty clear about that, but that was a long time ago when you guys were in Austin. Go back and before you start editing, I would say either ask me or Emily on Facebook what to do, or go look at the resources that we've pinned at the top of the page, which is everything we taught you guys is in a post that I pinned up there. You can click in and see all the what next steps. So that's my dad lecture to all you guys. I want to second, though, this idea of the Zoom happy hour with Hussein that's popped up in the chat here. I really encourage you guys to do that, actually. There's nothing keeping you from helping each other out, and you should do it. And Hussein, if you record them and are really dropping fire, that's a great way for you to get hired by Tucker. You show them what you're doing.
Stack and cheese real soon. You know, $10 a pep talk. Let's go.
It's a whole new market developing right in front of us.
I know, right?
Yeah. No, I think that'd be really fun. But you guys help each other out however you can. That would be great. All right. We got like 10 minutes left. Who else has something they want to talk about? Otherwise, I'm going to start picking on you again.
I have a question.
Yeah. Ted.
I have a question about bonus content. Oh, also, by the way, did I just hear Lauren say you're in San Diego?
Yeah,
yeah, that's right. San Diego.
Nice. Yeah, me too. I'm downtown. So what up, San Diego?
Cool. Nice.
If we were allowed to.
I'm in Little Italy.
Oh, nice. Yeah. I'm in Cortez Hill. if we were allowed to actually see other humans, I would say we could meet up for a beer or something.
Right? Coming soon in like 6 months.
Yeah. That was actually not my question, but I'm super excited that another San Diegan is in this group. My question is about bonus content. So it's a pretty straightforward question, I think. But so when I'm writing the book and I have those moments when I want to transition the reader to maybe go to my website so that I can capture that as a lead for, to turn it into business. What's the best type of bonus content? Should it be something that's not in the book? Like, here's further, deeper explanation of this idea. Go here to download this thorough analysis. Or should it be more of like go here for the guide of what you just read about so you can take it back to your team to learn how to go implement this idea?
I don't see a big distinction between those two right off the top. The important principle to bear in mind is what we call not breaking faith with the reader, right? They've got to have everything they need in your book that they reasonably can. Something like a spreadsheet doesn't work, right? And that's a really logical thing to put in bonus content. Hey, if you want to download a giant ass spreadsheet that I can't fit in the book, you can get it over here. But if somebody couldn't do that, you'd still want to have fully explained what that spreadsheet is, how they could build it, how they use it, all of those things. So if it's just extra that is like icing on the cake, I think it could be a lot of different things. I guess, Ted, tell me more about what you think the distinction is between those.
I think the depth. So one would be like, all right, so I'll give you an example. I talk about how to build, so for everyone who doesn't know, my book is about application security, like dealing with hackers. And so this one topic area I talk about is how do you build security into the software development process. And so I talk about one method for how you build software, but there's a lot of different methods. And so I don't want to make my book like, here's all the different methods of building software and here's how you build security in all of them. It's like, here's one. And so I can show you it's actually easier to do than you think. And if this isn't your method, go download here, this link, all the other methods. So that would be the like thorough type of content that's like you go somewhere to go read more things. The other might be like an exercise, like, okay, you just read these 3 chapters about this idea, go download this 1-page guide that you can go to your team and you, Mr. or Mrs. Reader, can facilitate and walk your team through how to implement these ideas you just learned about.
Okay, that clarification really helps. So, because I have 2 different emotional reactions to those 2 things. The first one you described, I'm like, wow, that's really cool. This guy has totally shown me how to do this. And he's then taken the time to write something super specific to whatever my situation is, and I can go get it here. Makes it incredibly easy for me. That's awesome. The second one is, why isn't that just a page in the book of questions that I can walk over to my team with? So I would want that. Why the hell do I have to go download that? Why didn't you just put it in the book? See the difference?
Yep, definitely.
So think about, and maybe even test it with people, like what's their emotional response when you're thinking about putting something on your website versus putting it in your book.
Got it. Okay, that's super helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else have thoughts? I don't want to monopolize this.
Just from reading books, one thing I see is I'll still go to the website. Like they may put something in the book, but they'll be like, go get these questions at the website too. So like you could have them there and I think have a link on the website. Like I agree with you, Hal, like they shouldn't have to go to the website, but like, for example, Miracle Equation, like he tells you the questions, but instead of like trying to write all that down, it was easier for me to just like bookmark it and go to the website and get the list of questions because I was doing an audiobook. So, and maybe that makes it different, but I think, yeah, give it to them, but then you could still have it like as an online resource just because it's easier and then you can get their content or their leads too.
Yeah, that's good too. Yeah, audiobook is a whole other situation for something like that, because then you definitely want to make sure you've got resources available for people to download. Just think about being helpful to your reader. Like that's kind of your goal here. Mike had a question. Mike, you said you got an appendix, lots of forms, contract spreadsheets. If you send them to us, will we tell you what needs to go in the book? No, you need to figure this out because you've got to decide what makes your book complete for your readers. So imagine a reader who literally can't download for some reason. How can they still get value out of your book? Now, the truth is they may not be able to get your spreadsheet. And there's some places where you're going to have to finesse that. But to the greatest degree possible, figure out how to make your book complete for someone who's never going to talk to you, never going to email you, never going to go to your website, never going to download anything. Still give them value, as much value as you can. And then, as Mary just said, put it in the book and put it on your website. Great. Make it convenient. That's an added bonus. I don't know, Emily, do you want to jump in on this with anything? What am I missing?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I totally agree with what Mary said. I think too that if you have it in line with the text in your book, and then on your website you have it in some sort of easily packetable format, right? Like these are all the worksheets from the book. You can download them as one PDF or whatever the case may be, where you're just making it super simple for the reader to get all those resources at once. It's a good way to go.
I just learned a word from Iona. I'm wearing a body warmer, apparently. Really helpful. I love new neologisms. That's redundant. Neologisms. So that's good to know. Thank you. It does sound a little morbid, honestly, but
that's why it's so great.
All right.
It's like you're this close to death, and you're like, "Fuck it, I'm putting on a body warmer."
I just normally, I don't usually have to be close to death to put a vest on, but all right, if that's how you tough Scots are, so be it. All right. Anybody want to take us out with anything else? Mary, you're usually good for a question.
Yeah. I kind of need a little help, actually.
Sure.
I'm in the editing phase, and last week you're like, just read the whole book through. I'm not quite the whole book. I guess what I want to understand is what timeline should I be shooting for? What kind of deadline? So when I was writing it, I had like a schedule, and I was like ahead of my schedule. I don't want to procrastinate to the point, because I'm starting to feel like I feel a little fear to where I don't want that to make me procrastinate, because I can think of a lot of other important things I need to do in life.
Yeah. I would say our rule of thumb is give yourself about a month to get your editing done. I mean, how much text do you have? How many words have you got?
40 some thousand.
Yeah. You should be able to get through that. If it's unless it's a total disaster, which I don't think it is, you should be able to just bang through that in a month. That would keep you right on schedule if you did that.
Okay. All right.
Is that it?
Awesome.
Nice,
that's it.
Nice and tidy. I like that.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. I'm going to give you guys a half a minute back in your evening. Thank you all so much for showing up. It's really nice to see you all. I look forward to this. I know Emily does too. Everybody wash your hands, stay well, and look forward to talking to you next week.
Bye, y'all.
Thank you. Bye.